Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are watching from. You're welcome to Sweet Story, and we're bringing you a special report on a truly unprecedented address recently delivered by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the President of Burkina Faso. In a speech that has already begun to send ripples across the international community, President Traoré, often seen as a symbol of a new generation of African leadership, delivered a powerful and unyielding message to a global Assembly of Nations. This wasn't a typical diplomatic address. It was a deeply personal, fiercely nationalistic, and pan-African call to action that laid bare the historical grievances and current frustrations of many on the African continent. President Traoré began by distancing himself from the traditional diplomatic corps, stating, and I quote, "I greet you not as a career diplomat, nor as a man bred for banquet halls and handshakes. I do not come to you speaking the rehearsed language of polished politics. I come to you as a soldier of my people, as a guardian of a wounded land, as a son of a continent that has carried the cross of the world, yet has never worn its crown." He identified himself as Captain Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, and made it clear his words extended far beyond his nation's borders, speaking not only for the 22 million souls in my nation, but for a continent whose stories have been twisted, whose pain has been ignored, and whose dignity has been repeatedly auctioned off at the altar of foreign interests. His opening salvo was direct and unapologetic. Africa is not the bigger. Africa is not a battlefield. Africa is not your experiment, your puppet, your warehouse of raw materials. Africa is rising not to kneel but to stand. And today I say before this great assembly of nations, Africa will not kneel. This immediate and forceful declaration set the tone for the entirety of his approximately 30-minute address. He then systematically dismantled what he termed the false generosity of global politics. President Traoré did not mince words, accusing established powers of a profound hypocrisy. He stated, "For decades you have sent us aid with one hand while extracting our lifeblood with the other. You build wells in our villages while your corporations drain our rivers. You donate vaccines yet patent the cures. You speak of climate action yet continue to fund the very forces that burn our forest and dry our lakes." He questioned the very nature of this aid, asking, what kind of generosity is this? The kind that feeds the mouth but silences the voice, the kind that keeps a man alive just enough to keep him dependent. He was unequivocal in his rejection of this model, proclaiming, "We are not blind to this hypocrisy. Let me be clear. We are not ungrateful for sincere humanitarian assistance, but we reject a global order that disguises exploitation as partnership. We reject financial institutions that lend with one hand and steal sovereignty with the other. Africa no longer wants charity. We want justice. We want control over our own destinies." This was a direct challenge to the existing frameworks of international development and finance, demanding a fundamental shift in power dynamics. Moving to the deeply sensitive topic of colonialism, President Traoré asserted that Africa's wounds did not begin with us. They were inherited legacies of an empire-building madness that saw us not as humans but chief, as cargo laboratories. He evocatively described the arbitrary drawing of African borders, stating, "My ancestors were not consulted when maps were drawn with rulers and compasses in Berlin. The borders of Burkina Faso, like those of many African nations, were not carved by our ancestors, but by men who had never stepped foot on our soil, who knew nothing of our languages, our tribes, or our spirits." He argued that colonialism, far from being a relic of the past, has merely evolved. Today, he declared, colonialism has a new face. It wears suits, it hosts forums, it signs contracts in Geneva and Paris and Washington. But it still takes, without consent. It still dictates instead of dialogues, it still silences instead of listening. He challenged the notion that peace could only be taught by former colonial powers, stating, "If you want to talk about peace, then let's begin by unlearning the arrogance that peace is something only you can teach us." His address continued with a searing indictment of resource exploitation and what he called the myth of development. President Traoré expressed outrage at the term developing being applied to African nations, framing it as a dismissal of historical injustices, He stated, "They call us developing as if the theft of centuries did not set us back, as if the gold from our lands, the diamonds from our rivers, the oil beneath our feet did not build the very skyscrapers in D which this assembly sits." He then made a powerful and direct statement about Africa's inherent wealth. "Let us speak plainly. Burkina is rich. Africa is rich in minerals and culture and wisdom and youth, but you have taught us to measure richness in GDP and export value." He strongly criticized the practice of foreign companies owning vast percentages of African resources, while local communities remain impoverished. "You call it development when a foreign company owns 90% of a gold mine on our land. You call it progress when your security forces guard cobalt mines, but not our children's schools. That is not progress, that is piracy with legal documents." He concluded this point with a definitive statement. "From now on, we will define development on our own terms, development that puts children in classrooms, not minerals on cargo ships, development that respects the land, the people, and the soul of a nation." This is a clear demand for self-determination in economic policy and resource management. On the crucial issue of sovereignty and interference, President Traoré posed poignant questions. Why is it that when an African nation makes independent choices, we are called unstable? Why is it that when we seek military cooperation outside the colonial sphere, we are labeled a threat? He asserted Burkina Faso's newfound autonomy with conviction. Burkina Faso has chosen to walk a path of sovereignty that is not a threat to peace. It is a declaration of adulthood. We are no longer under your guardianship. We are no longer your junior partners in diplomacy. We are a free people. He emphasized the wisdom of choosing respectful partners over exploitative ones. If a nation chooses partners that respect it rather than exploit it, that is not rebellion. That is wisdom. And in a bold declaration he stated, "Let it be known no foreign power will dictate the alliances of Burkina Faso. We will build relations based on mutual respect, not historical guilt or present-day intimidation." The president then tackled the complex and devastating issue of terrorism, linking it to external agendas and what he described as manufactured wars. He challenged his audience with direct questions. You ask why there is violence in the Sahel. You ask why our youth take up arms. But you do not ask who benefits when our mines are guarded by private mercenaries while our villages are left vulnerable. You do not ask how weapons arrive in deserts that produce no steel. You do not ask why peacekeeping never seems to end the war. His conclusion was stark. The truth is, many of the so-called solutions to African security problems are merely business models. Endless conflict has become a market, and African suffering has become a subscription-based service. Burkina Faso has decided to break that cycle. We will fight terror but not with dependency. We will secure our nation not with foreign dictates, but with national dignity. This is a radical reinterpretation of security dynamics in the Sahel, pointing fingers at external actors for perpetuating conflict. On the equally pressing issue of migration and human dignity, President Traoré expressed the pain of seeing African youth perish while seeking opportunity abroad. We do not want our youth droning in the Mediterranean. We do not want our brightest minds fleeing to countries that once called us savages. We do not want remittances. We want reasons for our people to stay. He directly addressed the root causes of this exodus. Why do our youth flee? Not because we lack beauty, but because we are made to lack opportunity. Not because we hate our land, but because our land is treated as someone else's property. He framed migration not as a crisis in itself, but as a symptom, stating, "Migration is not a crisis. It is a symptom of wars we did not start, of loans we did not need, of a world order that tells our youth their only value lies outside their own homes. The solution is not border fences. The solution is justice." This is a powerful humanistic plea, demanding a re-evaluation of global economic and political structures that contribute to forced migration. President Traoré then articulated Africa's rightful place in the world, vehemently rejecting the notion of a failed continent. He passionately declared, "Africa is not a mistake to be fixed. Africa is not a failed continent. Africa is the womb of the world, the cradle of civilization, the keeper of tomorrow's hope. He highlighted the gross imbalance in global decision-making, specifically pointing out that, at the UN Security Council, Africa with 54 sovereign nations has no permanent seat. What justice is this? You call it balance, we call it betrayal. He challenged the hypocrisy of advocating democracy globally while maintaining an undemocratic international structure, stating, "You speak of democracy, yet uphold a global structure, where the powerful few veto the dreams of the many. We will no longer whisper in rooms where we deserve to speak with full voice." He also touched upon the spiritual dignity of the African people, reminding his audience of Africa's ancient spiritual traditions that predated the arrival of foreign religions. He posed a critical question to religious institutions. But now, we ask, will the church and the mosque stand with us, truly with us, when all people are displaced by greed masked as globalization? Will your pulpit echo our cries or only repeat the songs of the powerful? Faith, too, must be decolonized. It must walk with the poor, not the privileged. A significant portion of his address was dedicated to the growing unity among African nations, particularly highlighting the emerging bond between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. He challenged the fear that this unity seems to evoke in some quarters, stating, "This is not a speech from one country. This is the stirring of a continent. You see Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso forming a new bond. You fear our unity. Why? Because it threatens the myth that Africa can only rise under your supervision." He clarified the purpose of this burgeoning unity. We are uniting not to wage war, but to wage dignity, to pull our courage, to share strength to protect each other when the world turns its back. Pan-Africanism is not a dream. It is our lifeline, and we will build it stone by stone, heart by heart, with or without your approval. This is a clear declaration of intent towards greater regional integration and self-reliance, with or without external blessing. Finally, President Traoré addressed the youth of Africa directly, in what was perhaps the most emotionally resonant part of his speech. He called to the young boy selling oranges by the roadside, to the girl who walks 10 kilometers to attend school, to the child whose only choice is a stone but who dreams of stars. He declared, "You are the reason we fight. Do not believe the lie that your continent is cursed. You are the blessing. Do not envy foreign passports. Be proud of your name, your land, your roots. The world may not applaud you now, but the future will speak your name in honor." This was a powerful message of empowerment and hope, aimed at inspiring a new generation to build their future within Africa. His concluding remarks reiterated his central theme with resolute force. "We will not kneel," he declared. "I do not come to declare war, I come to declare will. So we will not kneel to fear. We will not kneel to foreign banks. We will not kneel to outdated empires, masquerading as friends." He concluded with a visionary statement about the future he envisions for Africa. "Africa is not asking for a seat at your table. We are building our own table where no child eats last, where no nation is silenced because it lacks nuclear arms, where justice is not filtered through the lens of race or history, but shared his breath is shared. This is our vision and this is our vow. Let the world hear it today and always. Africa will not kneel." Thank you. President Traoré's speech was a seismic event in international diplomacy. It was a potent mix of historical grievance, current, frustration, and a clear vision for an independent, self-determined African future. His words will undoubtedly be dissected and debated for days, weeks, and months to come, marking a pivotal moment in the ongoing conversation about global power, justice, and the future of the African continent. This was not merely a speech, it was a manifesto. We will continue to monitor the reactions from capitals around the world. Stay tuned to Sweet Story for further updates.